Mike? Let's call the council meeting to order. Allie, are you taking roll? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Councilmember Bruce Bassett. Here. Councilmember Jane Baum. Here. Councilmember Mike Zero. Here. Councilmember Mike Grady. Here. Councilmember Dan Grouse. Here. Deputy Mayor El Jenke. I'm here. Mayor Jim Pearman.
Here, and thank you. Reconvening after our study session, and before we start our special business and regular agenda items, I do want to thank once again all the people in our Parks and Recs department, everyone who got their hands involved with our lighting of the tree and all the festivities at the fire station, and all the guys serving up chili once again. And we had a few of us there that evening. Bruce was there. Dan was there, Jane was there, and it was a chilly night, and it was really a great evening and lots of people. So well done, and please extend our thanks to their staff. With starting the evening, this is a special evening, a very special evening. Tonight we honor one of our own, our Deputy Mayor, El Jenke. And before we do kind remarks, or other remarks, on the City Council, we went through a course years ago where they decided on our management styles and what colors we were. And there's a couple different colors. And there was a blue person who is really interpersonal and very friendly, and relationships were everything. And yeah, all right, okay. And so that was it. Then they have green and a brown, green and a red and a brown. And a brown is L. Basically, it was get the job done, let's go. And it's quite a little different than a blue. And we have been the brown and blue team for 4 years, and I think he's become more blue than I've come brown.
You say black and blue team.
Yeah. But before we start going, I think it's only appropriate that we give him something to remember this. This is a blue little animal that maybe you want to, and it looks like, I was looking at the face of this, and it kind of looks like our expressions after some of our debates. And so I think that remembering that you really did become a interpersonal guy these last 4 years, and we really enjoyed you. The other thing is this morning I picked up my daughter at the kindergarten at Lake Ridge, and on the wall was El Jenke's name. And once again, I remember that El Jenke has his name on more city buildings than any other person on Mercer Island. More schools, community centers, and everything. And so the only thing he doesn't have yet is a statue. And maybe since the statue. So the art commission is here tonight, and so I'm just, yeah, you know. But I do. But with this, I'm going to be reading something that kind of memorializes all the things that El has done for the city over decades, and it's something that's quite impressive. For those who are in the audience who'd like to see, it's a 2-pager, and it's the first 2-pager I think I've ever seen. And it is quite something. And I'm just going to go through this, El, and you can hold your blue friend as I do this, and just kind of hear what all the accomplishments of this person is. So the resolution of acknowledgement and commendation for El Jenke's service to the citizens of Mercer Island. Whereas El Jenke has served the citizens of Mercer Island with distinction for 16 years in public office, including 4 years on the Mercer Island School Board of Directors, 12 years on the Mercer Island City Council, with the last 4 years as Mercer Island's Deputy Mayor. Whereas El was first elected to the City Council in November 1999 and subsequently re-elected to his position in November 2003, and November 2007. Whereas during L's tenure of community service, Mercer Island experienced an era of great activity and achievement. Among the city's accomplishments were realization and implementation of the town center revitalization effort, securing a 60-year water supply agreement, securing city ownership of Luther Burbank Park, construction of a new community center, a main fire station, and a new park and ride lot, funding major improvements to Pioneer Park, Mercerdale Park, Homestead Field, Island Crest Park, the high school football field, stadium, and South Mercer playfields. Creation of a long-term funding plan for Mercer Island fire apparatus. Enactment of major pieces of legislation, including the tree ordinance, town center design. We're just smiling at Dan for a minute. Okay, all right. Guidelines and design guidelines outside the town center. Permitting and construction of the Boys and Girls Club's peak facility. Construction of the Sewer Lake Line, the city's largest and most complex capital improvement. Partnership with the Mercer Island School District to keep Mary Waite Pool open and operational. Enactment of the city's tent city ordinance, affordable housing tax exemption ordinance, and completion of a draft shoreline master program update. Whereas L's service as a city council liaison is an impressive list of municipal leadership, including Aircraft Noise Abatement Committee, 2001 to 2003, 3 years. Cascade Water Alliance, 2001 to 2003, 3 years. The City School District Peak Ad Hoc Committee, 2006 to 2007, 2 years. City School District Ad Hoc Committee, 2010 to 2011, 2 years. Disability Board, 2010-2011, 2 years. I-90 Steering Committee, 2006 to 2011, 6 years. Mercer Island School District Big Idea Committee, 2008 and 9, 2 years. Parks and Recreation Subcommittee, 2002 to 2011, 10 years. Planning Commission, 2008 to 2011, 4 years. Public Safety Subcommittee, 2001 to 2005 and 2011, 6 years. Utility Board, 2001 through 2005, 5 years. Volunteer Firefighters Pension Board, 2001 to 2003, 3 years. Whereas L will be remembered by his council colleagues for his integrity, fairness, intelligence, and his ever-vigilant focus on fiscal conservatism, providing a steady and confident hand through difficult financial times. Whereas L has shown us all how to change our minds when the moment calls for it and how to maintain our fundamental values when others seek to compromise them. Whereas the police department will miss his Navy SEAL enthusiasm out on the Marine Patrol boats during seafair. And whereas by retiring from public office, Al is sure to enjoy his time with his wife Gail, his children, his grandchildren, and his waterborne passions of boating, skiing, and scuba diving. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Mercer Island, on behalf of its citizens, the City Council commends L. Jenke for his more than 16 years of distinguished public service and extends its sincerest thanks and appreciation for his time, his considerable skills, and his many contributions to Mercer Island, a community he can always call home. Approved this 5th day of December 2011, and it was with sincere thanks. I congratulate you, sir. You might notice this is a big one. It was hard to put everything on there. And so with this, it's L. Jenke, Deputy Mayor 2008 to 2011, Council Member 2000 and 7, an appreciation for your many years of exceptional service to the citizens of Mercer Island City Council, 2000 to 2011. There you go, Al. And before we open it up to general comments from the council, the chief would like to come forward.
Yes, good evening. Ed Holmes, your police chief. And I recently received a request from our police union leadership that they would have a couple minutes here at tonight's meeting to also express some thanks for the deputy mayor. So with that, I'll introduce Officer DeChant, a member of the executive board of the police union. He'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chief. Chris DeChant. I am the Police Association's delegate to the Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs, and I'm not a real good public speaker, so bear with me. We, the association, would like to express our thanks for all the years of support Mr. Janke has given the police department. You've served twice on the Public Safety Committee, helping us through issues such as the dispatch transition to Kirkland and now Norcom, bicycle pedestrian safety concerns, school safety planning, and emergency management planning. As was mentioned in the mayor's comments, you just demonstrated your interest in our matters by coming out with us on Seafair Weekend, riding on the boats with officers, and as a veteran of 7 Seafair Weekends in a row being on the water, I greatly appreciate that because it's not as fun as it looks. We appreciate everything you've done over the years to support public safety, and this is an expression of thanks from our police association. Thank you, sir, for all your support.
Well, I think what we're going to do is let our guys say a little bit, and then you can have the floor. How's that? If you want to, or do you want to have the floor?
Well, I'm going to have a few things to say, but but I feel uncomfortable here listening to these unwarranted accolades because everything that was described was done by the city council as a whole. Really does one of us individually pull off these kinds of successes and endeavors. So, but they're all greatly appreciated. Thanks so much to everybody who's said and thought those kind words.
Council?
I'd be delighted. I've served now with Elle on the council since February, and I've enjoyed it very much. We go back a long way, though. I remember Elle when he was on the school board. We didn't always agree on everything, but I have truly come to respect this man. He's forthright, a straight shooter. He's funny. I admire him greatly, and I also know something that maybe some of you don't know. I happen to have been with him on the sister city delegation to France. And you should ask him to speak a little French sometime and sing a little French, and I know that he can dance in French very well. He does a good conga line, but truly we will miss him very much. I've enjoyed serving with you, Elle.
Thank you.
So as the other half of the infamous class of '99, now that we've lost Sven and you're gone, and so that leaves me. But I've had the privilege of being on the council for the entire 12 years that Ella's been on the council, and it's I was thinking about this for a while last night as to what the best analogy is, and working with Ella over the past 12 years, it's a little bit like a marriage. You've got your high points, your low points. Sometimes you get mad at each other. But what's been tremendously gratifying about the past 12 years in working with Al is that I think what he epitomizes is the ability to find common ground and to look for solutions to problems, not to be doctrinaire, not to say that it's my way or the highway, that realizing that our role in government is to find solutions, is to reach consensus positions, is to find middle ground, that no one of us has all the answers. And Al, throughout this process, has always shown that he understands that and understands what the true role of government is, and has looked to find answers to problems instead of trying to find the problem. So I will miss this last 12 years in going forward on the council, and so it's been an honor to serve you with you, Al, and you've accomplished a heck of a lot in your 12 years, and the city and this council is a lot richer because of it.
Bruce? Well, Al, I've only served 4 years with you, so not nearly the longevity of Dan, but the thing that I've always been impressed by is how someone with as big a job as you have during the day still finds time to really delve into the details on our agenda bills. And I know that you always could be counted on to be the one who had read in depth the financial figures deep into the agenda bills that no one else found the time to really dig into. And yeah. And as I think about that, your time spent doing that, and as I think also about all of these accomplishments that have been listed, and you're gracious in saying lots of people have been involved, but what doesn't show up there, I think, is just how many hours of time go into the meetings and more meetings that you've put in to getting to the point where these accomplishments have occurred. And so I just add my great thanks for your commitment to the city.
Well, Al, I've been with you about half the time, I think, at least 6 years. And as Dan mentioned, we've had some entertaining moments. But, I was thinking, driving into work this morning, some of the key moments, and they're really kind of in different areas. One, I remember when we were battling the tent city, and you stood firm with me on a number of key principles there, and I always remembered that. So that's on the serious side. On the not so serious side, I remember you complaining that the Blue Angels had too much airtime over Mercer Island. So I'm hoping that during your off time that you'll fix that, and that they'll actually practice much more before they get here. I know you've been a huge fan of bike and pedestrian lanes and all associated amenities associated with the biking community, and for that I'm deeply in your debt. And lastly, almost lastly, I'm certain that you're going to, in the not-too-distant future, buy an electric car, if not an electric bike. But lastly, I do have to tell you, Al and I trail a lot of emails, and no, they aren't for public records disclosure. Personally, but you have an amazing library of just hilarious cartoons and emails. So I want those to keep coming. Okay. And again, as your colleagues have mentioned, it's been a pleasure and an honor to serve with you, and I appreciate it.
It's a done deal.
I really appreciate the time Al spent with me. I look at him as a mentor, mentoring me through the council from the very beginning, and then almost every meeting I'll talk to Al and get a feel for where he's going or where he feels the council's going. I've used that, really have valued that. Certainly, his understanding and grasp of the financials of the city are well known and will be deeply missed. Just his analysis and his keen ability to key in on hundreds of pages of financials is something that the city will miss. So, Al, enjoy your gift of time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sure. My turn?
One final comment, and it's all, you know what, why don't I might not say something nice after you have your turn. No, so, I just want to say one thing about public office. There's a concept, and I think it is noble to serve your community, no matter what's happening nationally and what people try to say about public leaders. It is a noble thing. And with that, I think that the most important thing and the only thing that we have as council members is our integrity. And that's what you're all about. That's all he's about. You know what? You shake his hand, it's a done deal. And I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I didn't come exactly bearing gifts, but I do have a few gifts and awards, and I'm taking advantage of the occasion. And I thought I'd start with actually Mike and Mike. And
Where this is going.
And
Moving back.
since I've noticed that you two have been singing the same song now for about a year, I thought I'd get you both the same CD. Since you both know the same songs, so for both of you, here, the best of the Righteous Brothers. Okay, so this may be the pièce de résistance, as they say, at Tenon, whatever. But this is an award. This actually is the City of Mercer Island's most prestigious award, and it's even more prestigious than Citizen of the Year or even Citizen Lifetime Achievement, and we now give 2 awards. This award is so prestigious that it's only been given once before, and that was a number of years ago. And this, to your mayor, Mr. Mayor Pearman, the award committee has selected this award for him unanimously. The Golden Rubber Chicken, awarded this 5th day of December 2011 to Mayor Jim Pearman for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty for the benefit of the community and city of Mercer Island and in action against its enemies. Mayor Jim Pearman is hereby awarded this highest Mercer Island honor. Without regard for his own personal safety, character, and integrity, Mayor Pearman, for 3 consecutive years, has single-handedly attempted to reform and rehabilitate the Mercer Island City Council, an effort at which he has utterly failed. For these noble and heroic efforts, he has suffered grievous and irreparable psychic wounds, causing him to resort to such hazardous activities as rowing, an activity which has caused him grievous bodily harm. Wasn't it a heart attack or something? On the defining issue of his community service, the design, financing, and development of Mercer Island's Community Center, Mayor Pearman, again without regard for his own personal safety, has risen from the abject failure of crushing defeat at the hands of the voters in a campaign led by one Chip Miller to victory in a council campaign led by a major mayor that created our magnificent community center at Mercer, since renamed, but this single resounding rebound defines his character, integrity, and determination. This former towering community leader, after all, many times he's claimed he was 6'4" and 220 pounds at the beginning, has so disoriented his council colleagues that they successfully settled a tent city controversy and put the South End on a road diet. Despite the inspiration of his fearless leadership, his colleagues and other community activists have often launched savage guerrilla attacks from both the left and the right, attacks which with his deft guidance have effectively been neutralized and rendered harmless. Mayor Pearman's superlative courage, daring, and leadership of the city of Mercer Island these past 3 years exemplify the finest tradition of community service and reflect the utmost credit on him and the city of Mercer Island. His indomitable fighting spirit, great devotion to duty, and utter disregard for his own personal health and safety in the face of powerful enemy fire will be sorely missed.
Thanks, Al. Oh, my God.
Well, this, folks, is the golden rubber chicken. And you'll notice it's not yet golden because I had to keep her out of the sun because I want you to notice that she's not naked. She's not even wearing a two-piece. It's a single-piece bathing suit. And Henrietta, actually, her name's Henrietta. Okay, I don't want you to forget that.
I will never forget that, Al.
She's very hormonal, range-free, no MSG, boneless. Oh, I can't say that. So, congratulations, Your Honor.
Well, thank you for the chicken here. Oh my gosh, he even has a plaque. Mayor Pearman, Jim Pearman, Golden Rubber Chicken, City of Mercer Island, December 2011. Well, thanks, Al. He's not done. I know.
Oh, no, we got a ways to go here. So, Dan, you've been up here for 12 years with me, and for having endured that, you absolutely deserve an award. So the question is, what award? So, in recognition of your enormous talents, expertise, and ability as a traffic engineer, and let me give you a little background on this. From the moment Dan got on the council, he has run this sort of quixotic crusade against stoplights. His goal as city councilman has been to make sure that we have only one stoplight, that being 40th and Island Crest. And for 10 years he succeeded in his crusade. We now have one at 40th and 86, I think, and maybe this month, two more, the first two in the town center. So for your valiant crusade against stoplights, the committee, the award committee, has hereby awarded you the Golden Stoplight Award. Now, I've got to preface this, but the Golden Stoplight is still at the jeweler being fabricated, so it's not yet ready for award tonight. So in lieu of that, we thought that that it might be good to award you a one-way ticket to the city of Jodhpur in India. So you might wonder, why Jodhpur, India? Well, according to Tom Friedman, the columnist for the New York Times, Jodhpur, India, a city of 1.2 million people, has exactly one stoplight.
That kind of town.
And the city traffic flows. So I thought it only appropriate for Dan to go there and see that, in fact, Mercer Island could and should have survived with just one stoplight. So also, rumor has it, this has not been confirmed, that the traffic also flows so well in Jodhpur because there are no roads or highways more than 2 lanes. So I'm just suggesting, Bruce, maybe you want to go along with Dan on this to Jodhpur to confirm that road diets really work, because they started in India. Okay, so, Bruce, in all seriousness, I've got a small token of appreciation for you and all your efforts to, as a founder and driving force behind the farmers market. And as I happened to run into a former councilman named Sven the other day, who actually, believe it or not, what's Sven Goldmanis doing today? He is peddling biodegradable water bottles, plant-based bottle. This is a water bottle that I guess dissolves whenever it's thrown away. Or so as a small token, and for you to start peddling at the farmers market next year, these kinds of water bottles. Okay, so what else do we have here? Jane, it's been brief, but it's been fun. Glad you didn't go too far into our escapades over in Tonon.
What happened in Tonon
stays in Tonon, absolutely, absolutely. So as in recognition of your efforts as founder, president for 10 years, and the chief advocate for our sister city relationship, I thought I'd get you the CD of Edith. Yeah. So I guess that's about all, except there's one last award. This is kind of a double award. The award committee felt that Mayor Jim Pearman should have another one. This was actually recommended by Sven, and this is a perpetual trophy, whose second recipient, again, is Mr. Pearman. It's a Chip Miller Inspirational Award 2007, and he's now bequeathing it to you, sir.
That was so thoughtful of Chip.
So, I guess I've run out of awards for tonight, but in a moment of seriousness, I would like to say that one of my heroes is General George Patton. And many of you probably saw the movie Patton, where he was characterized as a true or a pure warrior. There's a scene in that movie that where he was relieved of command for the second time, or saying nasty things about and about the Russians, and he's addressing his staff goodbye, and those thoughts come to mind as I depart. And Rich, to you and your outstanding staff, I would just say it's been an honor and a privilege to serve with you. Goodbye.
Okay. After that, I feel like we need a break, huh? Dance. Okay. Let's go on to appearances at this time. If anyone would like to address the City Council, please come forward. You have 3 minutes. Please give your name and address, and please come forward.
Good evening. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to speak tonight. My name's Lauren Schweet. You may have seen me here before in support of the Peak. You're all to be congratulated, and I'll take some congratulations as well for that wonderful facility. I was on the Mercer Island Boys Club board for 15, 20 years. I'm also a lawyer in private practice. I am a dog owner and dog walker. I've done my share of volunteer work, and I think my most important credential tonight is the mother of 3 young men that I, for the most part, have raised to successful young adulthood. I'm here with respect to the proposed ordinance on the underage gatherings, and my concern is that it is, I think it's a flawed ordinance, and I disagree with the scope of it. In particular, and some of you may have read my letter to the editor in the Reporter, is that this is a strict liability ordinance, and most of the people who support this ordinance do not understand what strict liability means. Strict liability means, Mr. Grouse, that if you are a homeowner and you have, and say for example, you're lucky enough to have community waterfront, and your home and your house is 3 or 4 houses up from the water, and a bunch of teenagers go down on the community property of which you are a part owner and have a party, not your kids, some other people's kids, that technically under this ordinance you would be held strictly liable for hosting that party. Strict liability means that it doesn't matter whether you knew about it, whether you supported it, whether you bought the beer, and it doesn't matter whether historically as a parent and a concerned member of this community that you have done everything within your power to stop and control this problem. I don't want you to misunderstand my intentions here. I do not agree with parents that allow their kids to drink underage, and my letter to the Reporter detailed what I have personally done to help control that problem. But my point is that it is a significant and complex problem, and if the purpose of this ordinance is to act as a deterrent, then it's overly broad, because you don't need to deter parents like myself that are doing everything we possibly can from allowing these things to happen, because I have 2 quick examples for you in my last 15 seconds. One, I know a family who went out of town when their son marched in the London's New Year Day parade. Their entire family was in London. Their house was broken into by young people who had an underage drinking party. Under this statute, under this ordinance, I would have been held liable for that. And if you don't understand, the police would have no discretion in this matter, because the way the ordinance is written does not allow the police to take into account the fact that that family's a nice family. They didn't have anything to do. It's not their fault. This ordinance needs to be rewritten so that responsible parents and property owners are not sanctioned for that kind of thing. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to address the City Council?
Good evening. My name's Lynn Tuttle. I live at 4341 Island Crestway. I'm also an attorney, and about 15, 16 years ago now, I obtained my master's in counseling, and I worked for about 9 years at Family Court Services at the King County Superior Court. And in the last 6 years, I've been in my own private business doing mediations and parenting plan evaluations and garden ad litem work. And the reason that that's interesting or relevant to this statute is that we had some email communication with Ms. Knight about whether or not this a citation under the statute would show up in what's called DCH. And I don't know if the council members are familiar with that or if you ever get into that, but it's defendant case history. The judges and commissioners in family law courts, as well as the criminal courts, but I'm talking more about family law court-appointed special advocates, and the family court services workers, where I used to work, all run defendant case history when they're doing family law cases. So what can happen, this is again how this ordinance is an issue, is if you have an innocent property owner who really knew nothing, who is held liable for somebody standing in their driveway drinking that they don't know, isn't related to their kids or their family, something like that, this then would likely show up. Ms. Knight wasn't sure, but because speeding tickets show up, and even when they're dismissed, they show up on this case history that the judges and commissioners and social workers run, I'm concerned that someone's family law case could actually be impacted by a citation. So I'm interviewing these people. We're trying to figure out where the children should reside, and the issue is, well, they must have issues because they have the citation for underage drinking. And again, these are examples of things like a person that we talked to earlier said she has a family and they share a driveway and there's parties nearby and she calls the police. Well, that wouldn't matter. If one of those teens comes up and is in her yard or her driveway, under this ordinance, they have, as Lauren stated, strict liability. So the idea is good to try to control this issue and to try to deal with it, but I think what needs to be done is some language around something like that they knew or should have known, or some kind of standard which doesn't say that somebody can hire a kid to walk your dog and then all of a sudden that kid brings in some friends and then you have a citation which can affect you in ways beyond what I think people anticipated. So I am just here to talk again about redrafting that portion of the language or adding language in about someone knowing something or having reason to know, because it isn't really fair to be citing people, and I think there's probably some due process arguments against citing people for behavior of which they had no knowledge of and they didn't participate in and they've done things to prevent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Graham Squire, and I work for Neighborhood House at 905 Spruce Street in Seattle, Washington. And I coordinate our Drug-Free Communities program in South Seattle, and we work to prevent underage drinking in South Seattle and throughout King County. And I wanted to congratulate the council and Mercer Island Communities That Care for having this come up for a vote tonight, the social host ordinance. And I had the privilege, before working at Neighborhood House, to work in Marin County, which I think of as kind of the Mercer Island of Northern California. And we worked to pass social host ordinances on the county level, and then they were passed in every municipality in Marin County. And it was very successful throughout the county. And more than just the ordinance itself, I think what was most important was that it really started a dialogue with parents and teens about underage drinking and what was appropriate behavior, and sort of set the community standard that this was not going to be acceptable in people's homes. So I hope that that's what happens here on Mercer Island. And we have drug and alcohol prevention groups all over the state that are keeping their eye on this vote tonight, and we look forward to hopefully passing social host ordinances in Seattle and King County and neighboring municipalities in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the council?
Good evening. My name is Jerome Roche. I live at 4341 Island Crest Way here in Mercer Island. The last speaker just referred to this as a social host ordinance, and I would wholeheartedly agree if it were a social host ordinance that it would be appropriate. But hosting means that you have some knowledge, that you are involved in some sort of way, and that means that you, in fact, participated in allowing a party to go on. This ordinance, however, doesn't state that. This ordinance says that you're liable whether you knew or you didn't know. So the problem I see with this ordinance is there are no defenses to the charge. You have other ordinances such as the red light cameras in other cities such as Bellevue or Seattle. You also have parking ordinances where you're liable, and that's certainly understandable because you have defenses there. You can say, I didn't see, there was no sign there, the sign was blown down for a driving offense, or excuse me, a parking offense. You could say in the red light, you were not driving, and those are defenses. Here you do not have a defense to the charge. The sheer fact of leaving your house makes you automatically liable for what goes on there. And so, one of the things that I'm concerned about is the stigma that is attached. Ms. Tuttle talked about family law cases. Well, the sheer fact that you were...
I'll need you to wrap up your comments.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, that's fine. Are those prepared comments?
No, they're not.
Okay.
So, I guess my whole thing is that there are the police has no discretion in this matter. you can call the police and say, there's a party going on in my house, and you automatically get cited whether you wanted it to happen or not. So I urge that you vote against it as it's written and have a re-examination of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the council?
Well, Alana Morris, I've been here 3 times now, and I wrote a letter also in the Reporter complimenting all of you for your diligence and the hours that you spent on it. I think we're having success here because dialogue is happening, and the ordinance hopefully will pass today, so we maintain the dialogue and we remind parents that Mercer Island is going to be in the forefront along with Marin, that we're not going to tolerate underage drinking on our island. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll close then public appearance, and we'll move on to the minutes. We've got 2. Do you want to do these individually or together? Together? Okay, we've got our special joint meeting with the Mercer Island School
Individually.
District. I'm sorry, individually then. So do we have a motion for the joint meeting of October 27th?
Move to approve the minutes from the special joint meeting on October 27th.
Yes. Okay, moved in second. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Second, then we have the study session and regular meeting minutes of November 21.
Move to approve the meeting minutes from November 21st.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Going on then to the consent calendar. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Okay. We have moved and seconded. Okay, any discussion? No.
I just have a question for Rich. We've got a legacy Ford purchase, Rich, on page 1, about midway through for $25,924.
I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor approve the consent calendar, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, on to regular business. We have Agenda Bill 4689, underage home drinking ordinance. This is second reading. And if we could, we've got Katie Knight coming forward.
Good evening, Katie Knight, your city attorney. I was going to just make a single point. I don't think there's necessity for another presentation by myself and Derek Franklin. But as to Ms. Tuttle's point with regard to whether this shows up on your record, mostly local ordinances do not show up on the DCHs. We have a local inattentive driving ordinance that if you get cited for, that generally does not show up on your DCH. I can't say absolutely for sure it won't show up because apparently every now and then they do get captured. I don't know how that works with DOL, but for the most part, I believe that it would not show up in your DCH. But then, as DOL increases their ability to capture the local ordinances, it may ultimately in the future show up in folks' records. So that is an important note to make. But if there's any other questions...
Okay, I have a question. So why are you saying that it's not going to show up on the record? Do you say that from an efficient procedural perspective of intergovernmental communications, or do you say that from the process is such to where the local ordinance like this won't go into a DCH database?
As your former prosecutor, we use a system called JIS, and the court clerks input into the computer system the various statutes as we're going through on the calendars that they can type in which the defendant was charged with, which statute the defendant was charged with. There, up to this point, has been no provision for the local ordinances to get placed into that. The information gets transported to DOL, but because the local ordinances can't get placed into it, there's not a standardization for it. That's why it hasn't been going to DOL. If that changes, that's what I'm saying, if that changes over time, it's a very clunky old system, and if they improve that, there's a possibility...
So that's my point, Katie, is the reason it's not getting communicated to DOL, you're saying? That would be the issue, that would be the department, DOL?
Correct.
is
Department of
because-
Licensing, right.
Okay, it's just because of inefficient transfer of data.
That's my impression, but it doesn't capture local ordinances.
Okay, so ideally, from whatever your perspective is, ideally, that information will seamlessly go, when I say that information, I'm going to be specific, the information at the local level will be seamlessly transferred to either to county or state.
It would be to the state, to
that's-
DOL.
That's ultimately where they're going to want to be, right?
I believe so.
So it's not a procedural issue that you're saying that that information doesn't go to DOL. It's an inefficient system. That's the reason.
Exactly.
Okay. So
If they ever upgrade it, and I would
Which
hope
they
that
will,
they
which
would.
they will.
Well, it's pretty ancient. But if they do, then there's the potential for it to be placed upon their records. So that's why at this point in time, local ordinance citations such as inattentive driving don't show up in folks' records. That doesn't mean in the future they don't improve it and that it could show up.
can you explain the strict liability that I think is Lauren? That's the first time I've heard. I think that's the first time I've heard of strict liability. What is that, and how does that apply to this ordinance?
In the initial meeting we had with regard to this ordinance, we discussed a variety of means to approach the actual charge. And one we refer to as strict liability, which is that if there were parties at your home, you could be charged with a citation. The other option we presented was affirmative defenses, where we had a list of potential defenses that you could say, such as, I have, just as they've spoken to, I have taken these particular precautions, and if you could meet that standard, then the judge would allow, or you could argue that you'd not be guilty of that citation. It's also something comparable that would be a speeding citation, where you can say, it's probably not a good analogy, but you could say, you absolutely can't go over 30 miles an hour in a particular area. So if you get pulled over and you're going over 30 miles an hour, arguably you're going to be cited with speeding. Obviously, the officers have discretion as to whether or not they're going to issue that ticket. With the idea that this ordinance was very narrowly drawn, the idea was that the instances would be fewer. This would be applied and obviously aimed, as you can see in the intent section, towards the big parties at folks' home. One of the anecdotal information pieces we've had over the years in not being able to deal effectively with these sorts of things is always the answer, I didn't know it happened. And you do have situations where parents will go off on vacation and leave their teenage kids at home and a big party happens. So what I had heard from counsel was, how do you capture that and how do you prevent that, which is why we drafted the ordinance in this particular fashion. Does that make sense?
Okay, Bruce?
Katie, building a little bit on what Mike just asked, we heard about a couple of what I would consider very extreme circumstances from the citizens who spoke. First being, there's a party 4 doors down or something at a community beach. Am I responsible for that? And then presumably everybody who's part owner in that community beach would also be responsible. And the second was, I've left my home with my kids, we're all away, and somebody's broken into our home and is having a party there. Am I responsible in that case? They both raised the question for me of, do our police have absolutely no discretion in giving the ticket in this case? And how does this work in practice when there's a sort of extreme case that occurs?
And certainly the officers do have discretion as to whether they issue the infractions. They absolutely have discretion. And in the case where somebody breaks into the person's home, they've obviously committed a crime of trespassing, and I would hardly expect our officers to then cite the homeowner whose home has just been broken into for hosting a social party. In civil law, and this is a civil infraction, this is an infraction with a penalty attached to it, a financial penalty. But in civil law, generally strict liability would be like a Model Toxic Control Act case, where there are layers of people who are held strictly responsible for polluting a piece of property, and that in that if you're going through the civil courts, that you're going to be held strictly liable. You can always defend against that and show why you're not liable. In this instance, the officers would, in fact, have discretion. I don't believe that in either of the cases mentioned that the officers would use their discretion to, in fact, issue tickets. They could not do that in the one where the person broke into the house, in fact, because there's already a crime being committed. And I don't know if our chief would want to add to that, but...
Thank you.
Actually, what about for Councilmember Jenke once he loses the, I won't go there, but.
Parties at his house?
No, what about the community beaches? What about community docks and community beaches?
I was looking at that, and actually, I apologize. Let me look at that because
immediate control, I think that's where it would fall under, and then 5 families would have immediate control over a community beach that we have here on the island, no?
I think that there would definitely be an ability to provide an infraction for that, but then I would think the infraction would have to be given equally to all the property owners. Given the intent of the ordinance, I don't believe that would be something that the officers would feel compelled to cite in that instance. On the other hand, if you had all those property owners saying, let's go have a big party on our beach, it might be appropriate. It's hard to say in the abstract, given that this is such a narrowly drawn statute. But if you were there, if you knew that there were all these families and they threw a great big party for all their teenagers on the beach, I'd ask the council, is that something that you'd want this infraction to be directed?
No, that's not what we're asking. So, I see beer cans at the beach club. They drive over to the beach club and they drink and then they throw. So what is preventing them, being our teenagers, to going at the end of we're going to a community beach with a bunch of beer cans and throwing a nice party there, and then the police come and they want to make an example of not having teenage parties at community beaches unsupervised, so they write an infraction, and they would have to write that infraction on, all the families that are part owners of that community beach, would they not?
That would be my argument.
It sounds like a unique.
Right.
That sounds like a unique situation we need to address. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, Katie, I got a question following up on this standard of strict liability. I didn't see that particular wording in the ordinance, but I'm assuming that's the intent here, or the implication. What's the legal standard that's just under strict liability? Is there a term for that? And is that reason that maybe that's not the way to go on this ordinance?
If you recall, the very first time we came and sought direction from the council, we talked about how the council wanted the ordinance to go, whether or not the party occurred at your home, were you going to get the citation, or were we going to incorporate within the body of the ordinance actual affirmative defenses that the persons could plead. And the council's direction was, let's go with the first, so that whether they knew, didn't know, if it's a person traveling out of town and their kids hold a big party at their house, ultimately they're still going to be held liable. One of the incidents that we've relayed to you was circumstances where the officers have come to someone's home and they'll say, I was upstairs sleeping, I didn't hear this big huge party downstairs. I had personal experience with that one and trying to deal with that particular one. And under this infraction, they still could get cited for it. Again, with the affirmative defenses, you could look to, these are the measures that I took. Arguably, it's at the end of the day, it's always the judge's decision. If they argue it in court, and the judge decides it satisfies his sense of what's appropriate, he can always mitigate it, reduce it, dismiss it.
But that doesn't sound like the strict liability standard we heard about. Because
from me or from them?
I don't know, either of you, both of you.
And again, the first step is the officers do in fact have discretion as to whether they write them or not. If you get pulled over for speeding and you're going 40 miles an hour in a 30, the officer does not have to absolutely write you a ticket for that. Am I right?
There you go.
Bring the uniform back.
That was the defense that I gave to one of his officers not long ago.
All right, Ed Holmes, your police chief, for the record. And so, yeah, to Katie Knight's point, we do have discretion here. Going 1 mile an hour over the speed limit is technically against the law, but the officers have discretion. What do they do with that? And she mentioned 10, but technically 1 over is a violation of the law. So with these cases, I mean, if someone commits a felony and they burglarize your house and they're in there, I just cannot see any of the officers here writing someone a citation for hosting a party at their house, if that indeed is the set of facts that's accurate. And on waterfront, I mean, these are things that, these are the decisions the officers make every day, right now. They exercise good discretion, and is this violation, are these actions that this person did, excuse me, are they truly in violation of the spirit of this law? What are we trying to accomplish here? And so they will exercise good discretion here. So I don't want people panicking that if someone truly breaks into their house, suddenly they're going to get a citation from the officer. We train these officers. They do exercise good discretion, and I would certainly expect them to continue that with this ordinance here. So just, we do have the discretion. That's what that would look like.
I was going to, Elle's question sort of prompted for me. Katie's kind of answered it twice, but maybe just boil it down. When we first came to the council, one of the set of about 5 different questions we asked, what kind of ordinance do you want? One of them was, do you want this standard of strict liability, or what's the other term?
Or we added affirmative defenses.
Affirmative defense. So one's strict liability, the other one you can have a series of defenses that you could cite in front of the court to determine whether or not you're guilty. It was one or the other, and your choice was, you chose strict liability because, if I remember that evening, what was sort of most persuasive to you was what Katie said. In the end, there's discretion by the officer to write the ticket, and then there's discretion by the judge whether or not he wants to mitigate it, dismiss it. In the end, as this thing gets adjudicated, it may well get softened. But at the outset, as a matter of council policy, you didn't want it started out softened. You wanted it to be fairly strict.
And I want to remind everybody, too, this is an extra tool for the officers, too, because if there is, we haven't even talked about the criminal
Correct.
Offense either, which can be, kicks in when it can be proven that the parents or the adults knew of the party going on and condoned it. So, you know, this is an extra tool because a lot of times they had a hard time proving that the parents knew when they said, oh, I was upstairs sleeping. So,
and frankly, as your former prosecutor, one of the additional tools it gives the prosecutor is that if you have a fairly mushy giving alcohol to a minor, or you have something and the person's a good person and they've never been in trouble before and it was an awkward situation or such, having the infraction actually allows the prosecutor to amend the charge down to the infraction as opposed to a criminal penalty appearing upon their record, and it would go to DOL and get on their record, and it allows them to bring it down to the infraction. We do that frequently if you get charged with driving with a suspended license, if they're able to get their license, because even though they've committed the charge, strict liability statute, once they get their license, which is the goal so that they will drive with licenses, that can be amended down to an infraction of no valid operator's license on person. So there's still a little penalty attached, but there's incentive given for the person to seek some mitigation of the actual criminal charge. In this situation, I could see if someone was charged with furnishing alcohol to a minor and they went to alcohol awareness classes, and that I could see the prosecutor also offering to amend it down to the infraction to the civil matter, just to give them an incentive to go through and do more positive things as opposed to just nailing them with the criminal charge. It's just another thought.
Mike?
Katie, at the last 2 readings, I raised the issue of the 19, and actually the way you've got it written is you have to be 18 or under to fall within this ordinance. Correct. And it was my understanding after the second reading that you're going to go back and do some rewording of the ordinance so that it doesn't focus so much on the term underage, because underage is defined in state and federal law as under 21. And I'm wondering if we still don't have a problem, because having read through this again, we use the term underage almost 20 times, but yet we have a definition in the ordinance of it being under 19. So if I'm hosting a party, and the kids that are drinking are 19 and 20, this would not apply, correct?
Correct.
So then I could use the affirmative defense with the gross misdemeanor of saying that I was asleep and I didn't know that they were drinking.
You could.
Okay.
And just to be clear, I apologize because I didn't, I thought that we'd actually cleared up that concern, keeping in mind that state law supersedes all the elements with underage drinking and such too, but we can draw that more narrowly, which was the intent of this infraction provision, and why we're saying, even though you, the state, have defined the class as being under the age of 21, for the purposes of this very narrowly drawn ordinance, we're going to say it's under the age of 19. And I thought we'd clear that up. I apologize.
Yeah, no, because the conversation we had was maybe, if anything, changing the title to something other than underage gatherings. Did Marin County use the term social host ordinance or something along those lines?
I don't know.
So that it's not confusing. Because when I read that and I see underage, I'm thinking, under the age of 21.
And we could do that on the record if you want to change it to social host ordinance. I don't know if Marin County did that.
This side? Jane? Any other questions for staff? Okay, I think then we'll bring it back to the council for then debate. Would anyone like to make a motion or start with that?
Yeah. Jim, I would move to adopt ordinance number 11C-14, holding persons responsible by having to pay a fine for failing to prevent underage drinking at gatherings on property they own or otherwise control.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion.
I'll speak to the motion. This is the third or fourth meeting we've talked about this ordinance. The reason we're doing this, very simply, is to try to provide our city police and our prosecutors and our youth and family services personnel with another tool in their tool chest to address what we all know is a serious problem, not only on Mercer Island, but throughout this country. What we can do as a city council is try to address it here. And I think we all know, having raised children on this island, that there are serious situations which our children are exposed to, that if we can help control those in some way by sending a message to parents that there are consequences for not taking appropriate actions, and they will not be able to get out of those consequences by simply saying, I didn't know, or I couldn't have known, then hopefully they will take more proactive steps to address what is a serious problem. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that our police department is fully capable of ensuring that if a house is burgled or if there is a party going on in a community beach, they're not going to go walk into the first house on the block and say, gotcha, that we're going to go and prosecute you under this ordinance. So I don't, there's a lot of good which hopefully will be accomplished by this ordinance, and I do not believe that we should back off from what we've already said in the first reading of this ordinance and in the prior study session on this thing, from what is an extremely important task we have, and that is to try to address the drinking problem that's on this island. And this is just one more step in that direction. And is it going to solve it all? Absolutely not. But the important point is we're going to take a step forward, and that's a very important step for us at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose an amendment to the original amendment, and that's to amend Section C or no, I'm sorry, section E, under definitions, underage persons shall mean any person under the age of 21, period.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, it fails without a second. Would anyone else like to address the motion? Okay, seeing none.
I actually would.
Okay.
I feel we're creating an arbitrary definition of underage drinking in this local ordinance, and I've got a grave concern about that because having raised at least 3 kids that are beyond the age of 21, I can safely say that many of those gatherings were hosted or organized by individuals that were 19 and 20. So I'm not sure why we have arbitrarily decided that 19 and 20 get to go and have the affirmative defense, but the 18 and under have the strict liability clause. So to me, just looking at it from kind of overall consistency, not only in terms of the title, but in terms of all the wording in the ordinance, I think we've got some exposure here in terms of the way this is written. And plus, I think the 19 and 20-year-olds should have the same standard as the 18 and under.
Any other comments on the motion?
I'd like to make an amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Mike?
Under Section 9.21.030 exemptions between A and B, or actually, it probably could be an extension of A. This chapter does not apply to any location or I'll just make it between A and B. This chapter does not apply to community beaches on Mercer Island.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, it fails without a second. Any more discussion? All right, at this time then, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, and it passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff and everyone. Chief? Okay. So we're moving on then. We're going to go on to the Arts Council proposal for sculpture purchase and installation. And do we have Diane is coming up? And Diane, once again, thank you for, again, a lovely lighting ceremony, the tree.
You're
well
welcome.
done.
I just want to know how you do the electronics on that tree lighting. It's just so amazing how you've got that worked out, so it just absolutely, when the kids press that, it just lights up.
Special button.
Special button.
It's a magic button.
It is a magic button.
Magic button.
Well, and I'd like to commend the staff on the lights are so much better this year. The tree is full of lights, and the shrubs near at the edge of Mercerdale Park, that's all new, and the trees are much more heavily lighted, and I understand it's a new contract that costs the city less.
Well, I thought it was Bruce that climbed to the top of the tree and put them up there.
I also think I've never before seen an open fires in Mercerdale. I thought that was a novelty, that we didn't lose anyone in the process. That was.
Well, thank you for coming out. Good evening, council members, and congratulations, Deputy Mayor, for your service to Mercer Island. And on behalf of the Parks Department, thank you for all your support over the years. Diane Mortensen, Recreation Superintendent for the record, and I'm here this evening to represent the Mercer Island Arts Council for the request for funding from the 1% for public art. It's the city's intention to create a variety of cultural opportunity for its citizens and to enhance the cultural environment in the community by encouraging and promoting the creation and placement of art in public places. It is the Arts Council's responsibility to make recommendations to the City Council that will reflect short and long-term range planning for artworks and sites regarding the appropriation of 1% for the Arts Fund. The Arts Council has been presented with an opportunity to acquire, through purchase and donation, art pieces that were created from recycled NASA titanium spacecraft parts from the Dale and Darcy Cox family of Mercer Island. All pieces were once hardware from the Apollo space project, and the family currently owns them, and they are on display at their home in their yard. The following I'm about to read is a blurb from an article that was written and published on the MSNBC website on September 1st, 2011. Dale's father, Dale W. Cox Jr., picked all this metal back in 1970 when NASA decided to cut the Apollo moon project short. The Apollo 18, 19, and 20 missions were canceled, and the tanks were no longer needed. The elder Cox, a former astronaut candidate who was familiar with the rainbow look of titanium, spotted the pieces in a California scrapyard. His mother, an artist, added metal embellishments to the titanium and collaborated with another artist, J. Carmichael, to present an exhibit of the pieces titled Titanium 1 in 1971. Titanium never changes color and it doesn't corrode, Cox said. It has been outside since my dad bought it and it's basically never changed. So that's a little history on the Apollo pieces. The families wish to have the pieces on display publicly for the community to enjoy, and we are requesting they be installed outside of the community center in the landscaping. The reclining woman sculpture by artist Giselle Berman was donated to the city by Jean Emilio Chatrion, who lived on the island for 30 years and recently moved and wanted to share this piece with Mercer Island residents because it was created by long-term resident and artist Giselle Berman, who was a friend of the donor. Giselle passed away in February of 2002, and two pieces that are on display in the community that you might be aware of are Introspection, which is at the library, which is the rabbit, and Fireflower at Farmers New Life Insurance. We would like to have Reclining Woman installed at the outdoor gallery near the Aljoya House. This evening, Jane Ditzler, who's the Public Art Chair of the Arts Council, is here to give you just a little bit more on the history of the Apollo pieces and to share her support and the Arts Council's support for the use of the public funds for these sculptures. Jane?
Diane, can you give us a sense of what size these are?
Yeah, the dimensions are in the agenda bill. On page 2, all of the Apollo pieces are, the dimensions are there. And you would see in the agenda bill that the cost is just over $20,000.
I'm Jane Ditzler, and I'm currently the Public Art Chair. Following the discussion about the alcohol, we maybe have a little bit of a happier thing to talk about. I'm very interested in this project because our Arts Council, Mercer Island Arts Council, has been told that we needed to find something that really was important in order to spend our money. And this particular set of pieces, a lot of them are donated. We're only having to spend a small amount for one of the pieces. The rest of the money comes for installation and that sort of thing. And they're not only art. If you saw them in person, they're really quite interesting looking, but they're a piece of history. The pieces are all from the lunar module. We don't have a complete lunar module. There is one in New York City, but there's a huge full fuel tank. There's a half a fuel tank, and there are 3 fuel lines. They all, as Diane said, they don't change color, but they did change color when they were tested, because as titanium is heated, it changes color. Now, as she also said, all of them right now are sitting in Dale and Darcy's garden on First Hill. They came to us from Palos Verdes. Dale paid for the transportation up here, and they're sitting there waiting, at least part of them, to be given to us, or we're going to be buying one of the pieces, if you all decide that this is a good thing. They're contemporary, they're very, very interesting, modern-looking pieces, which we think will enhance the community center. But they're also a part of the Apollo history. They're part of the Saturn rocket, and I just found out about them from these people in February or March, just after Seattle lost the possibility of bringing the space shuttle to Seattle. To have somebody living here on Mercer Island who is connected directly to the very first group of astronauts and have that family want to contribute this to the city seems to me something really interesting. We would intend also to make at least one, depending upon how these are arranged, bronze plaque to not only explain what they're about, who they came from, but also to put a little a model of the modular on the bronze plaque. Someone also suggested it would be really nice if we could have something bigger so that kids, for instance, could walk up to it and find the actual parts and how they fit into the model. We are waiting for you to decide, and truthfully, they're a good bargain. They're priceless, and they're very interesting. The other thing about the piece from Giselle Berman is totally separate. This was a complete donation, so the only cost that would come to us is for the installation. All of these things we think would make a real big, wonderful installation for the city, so we're hoping that you will say yes. Do you have any questions?
Jane, what are the dimensions on the reclining woman's sculpture?
That I don't know. I haven't seen that, Dan. That came, all that information came directly to Amber. So,
Diane's doing.
Yeah, it's big and heavy. That's true. At least it looks big and
Diane,
heavy.
can you do that pose here?
Probably not the way that she does her sculpture. I actually was her neighbor at one time. When we were building our house on East Mercer Way, lived across the street from Giselle, and so I've seen a lot of her work, and I did know her. And a lot of people, particularly people who are a little older and maybe even living at Aljoya, will remember Giselle. That's one of the reasons we decided to, put the thing down there. The other pieces we really felt would be safer and more interesting at the community center than in the sculpture garden. And then we talked to Art Tech, which is the premier installation company in the whole area, and they came to talk with the maintenance people and landscaping people at the community center to figure out how we could place them so that they would be permanent. These are definitely permanent pieces.
Is the intent to make them touchable? Are people supposed to come up and touch them, or?
We're going to try to put them back into the garden so that, for instance, the kids won't chain their bikes to them up there, or they're attractive enough that probably somebody would like to, sort of peck on them to make some sound come out of them. Dale and Darcy, who live on First Hill, the younger Coxes, they have the original piece that I was shown, which is 16 feet tall. It's a big cylinder, and it's purple, and it's gorgeous. I think we missed the boat on that one because it's really, really cool. Dale showed it to us. A number of the people from the staff and the Arts Council went to see these pieces, and he went ding on the side of the thing, and it made this wonderful sound. And he said that sometime, I don't know whether it was the 80s or 90s or when, the Los Angeles Symphony came out and used that that sound in the 1812 overture. So, there are a lot of real interesting stories. One of the things that I forgot to say, two things. The Arts Council is unanimous in wanting us to have these things installed. The other thing is that I think we can get a great deal of interesting publicity out of having these pieces on Mercer Island and telling the story. There's a lot of information available for people online, and there's a book written, so it's an interesting thing.
I'm sorry, so it's not clear to me. Maybe Diane has a better idea of how this would be displayed in terms of, how would people go up, what are you expecting in terms of how people will go up and look at it and enjoy it and without touching it, and you have to build a fence around it, or how's it going to work here?
We expect that people will touch it, actually. It's inevitable that artwork here in front of a pathway will be attractive for kids to walk through the garden, touch it, feel it. That is why Art Tech will be the ones to install it very well, very professionally, so that touching it, hitting it, banging on it isn't going to harm it. It would be more so with the fuel line tanks are quite narrow, lifting them up and pulling them out. So our techs assessed that and figured out a great way to permanently lay them in cement so that it doesn't happen, so there's no theft or damage.
So the idea is that people will be allowed to, can walk through it, can...
Yeah, I don't know, and that's all up for discussion when they come out and look at the area as well, whether it's in the landscape and you view it from afar, or there's a path that leads you up to it to read the plaque and to learn about it. So those are good options and good ideas.
Diane, could I say a couple things?
Should come up to the mic, Jane.
Okay. Actually, they are big enough that people can see them from a distance. The smallest one is 4 feet tall, 5, 6, and the main fuel tank is at least this wide, and like this. It actually can open. We will have one that's closed. It's kind of a bronze color. It has a lot of interesting light and color in it. So people will be able to see it. The other half is probably going to be sort of dug into the ground, as you might have seen in some of the pictures. Then the fuel lines are tall. So people can actually walk up close enough that they can certainly read the bronze plaques and find out what it's all about. And then the actual design and how they're going to get there, whether it's a path or something like that, can be really easily put together.
Can I ask that when you get to the point of actually finalizing the design, you come make sure the Arts Commission and or the Parks Committee has a chance to just see that before it's put in concrete, so to speak?
Okay. Yeah, all right, Mike?
Beauty is in the beholder of it, I suppose.
And you are. That's exactly why we have Arts Council.
I disagree. Okay. I do have a question about the titanium pieces. The way you explain it, I mean, I just see a science teacher explaining it to a child or a teenager or middle schooler, and it seems like the schools would be such a natural venue to have that on their school premises. And have you given any thought, or have you talked to the schools about that to see if they would be interested in
No, we didn't talk to them because we automatically, from Dale's description and then from going and seeing them, actually, it looked like the kids could wreck them pretty easily. One of the main reasons we decided not to have them in downtown in the sculpture garden is because if anybody painted them or tagged them, like the kids spray them, that would completely destroy the sheen and the color. It could never be erased, never could be really cleaned off. But we hope that because the community center is used so tremendously much by all generations, all ages, that people will go up there and look at them.
We do have security cameras at the center and lighting as well.
As part of our dog and pony show, I was going to ask that question. But we didn't script it. No, I had a similar question, and it was going to deal with painting them, too, because being an old pilot with various titanium products, that is a concern. So where would they be placed at the community center?
The idea is when you're facing the center, looking at the doors to walk in, there's landscaping off to the right along there.
So
and
right
then,
in the front.
Yeah, and then off to the left, there's another area there by the flagpole, little patch there. Those are a couple of options. That's not the permanent, those are some of the nice options that we thought would be in front.
Because what would really be cool, if we can't do it at the school, if we had some kind of kiosk at the community center, some interactive kiosk, not unlike what you have at the Smithsonian, so that people could learn about the Apollo space program. Did you discuss that at all within the Art Council? Absolutely, yeah.
Nobody
Can you come up to the thing? Thanks.
I suppose I should stay. Nobody did bring that up, but that's an awfully good idea. If we had thought of it, it was probably money we were thinking about. We want these to be outdoors. There's no room inside anywhere for them to be inside. And besides, the light makes a difference because they're different colors in every kind of light. But if we could have something like a kiosk inside the community center so that they could see them outside and go inside, maybe we should explore that and see whether you would be willing to come up with some more of the money.
Well, that, or you might look into the Smithsonian Foundation, or even, and I can help you with some other opportunities, but I think it's worth exploring, because then it becomes a kind of a teaching moment at the community center, which would be really cool.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
Any other questions?
I was going to offer a motion.
Can you, I do have a question. I think there's a real teaching value there if we can get those to the school. Is there a way that you can get some of that to the school, or?
They'd have to come to the community center because they're going to be permanently.
Yeah, that's a field trip to the community center. I think
well,
it would really be interesting to, and I hear the tagging issue, but that's an issue any place. I-90's well-traveled, and that gets tagged, or everything can get tagged. That's a risk for everything. I think it would be interesting for you to approach the school, especially with the building that they're going to undertake, and especially with the emphasis on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's a great segue. And Jane, just whenever you talk about it, like I said, I'll reiterate what I said before. Can you? It sounds like you sounded like more of a science teacher explaining the characteristics of this equipment that has a historical meaning in our country.
Well, I'm very excited about that part of it, but I thought probably that'd sell it more to you all than just the fact that it's art, particularly if it's not some kind of art that you love.
Well, yeah, right. If you sell it to me, I would choose more on the. I kind of have a hard time.
You suggesting we're not art connoisseurs up here?
Seeing the art part of it. You're right. I see more of the benefit to our kids in the school if we could get closer to their school. Is there any interest in the council in having the Arts Council talk to?
Well, why don't we finish up questions, and then we'll bring it back for debate. Okay. Is there any more questions for staff? Jane? No? Great. I know you've been working on this for a long time.
A long time.
Okay, and thank you for all your efforts in getting it this far.
Oh, I have to tell you one more thing. Because some of the pieces of art will stay up on First Hill at Dale and Darcy's house, they say people can come look at their art in their yard, and they certainly are willing to have an opening there so that we can all, make it a kind of a public thing. Because Dale's father is in his 90s, and he definitely feels that this is something he'd like to leave to posterity. So, thank you for your ideas, too.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to bring it back then to the City Council. Would someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd move to authorize funding of 6 permanent public art sculptures, including pieces named Fuel Lines, Descent Tanks, and Reclining Woman, from the 1% for Public Art Fund.
Second.
Okay, discussion on the motion. Now,
I'd like to make a comment. As the liaison to the Arts Council, I've been in on some of the discussion, and I had the distinct privilege of being able to go to the Cox's Garden to see some of the pieces, and they're stunning. And I'm thrilled that we have the opportunity to acquire them. And also the Giselle Berman, I have not seen that sculpture, but she is such a treasured, or has been such a treasured member of this community and nationally known artist. We are so lucky to receive that. And I guess I'd like to respond to the citing. I think it would be best to leave it up to the Arts Council to decide with the advice of Art Tech on where these pieces should go. I believe they would be seen by more people at the community center, and it would be a wonderful place for field trips to come to. It would be hard to decide what school should have them. I think that might be a problem. And they do belong to the whole community, and it's appropriate to be in sort of a garden setting. They can have plantings around them, which I think would be important, and it would enhance the entry of the community center. It's our front door to our community, and I like the siting of at the community center. I'm really excited to support this.
Any other comments on the motion?
Well, I disagree with that. I would like to see, I think that's yelling, that the titanium pieces, I think it's yelling to be in front of a academic institution, especially now where we are trying so much at the national level to fascinate these kids about about exploring science, exploring metals, and this is just, I think it's just screaming to be at our high school or the middle school or one of the grade schools. I would think metal studying is probably more appropriate at the middle school or high school, and I think it's a missed opportunity to put it at the community center, where many of the comments might be, well, what is that? What is that? Or,
You want to try to make a amendment then, or what do you want to do?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to, Mr. Mayor, I have an amendment to make. I'd like to make an amendment that the titanium pieces are located. See, we don't have that authority.
Well, that's where you're going with this. I mean, it's either the...
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment that we send this back to the Arts Council to have them talk to the school district to see if they're interested in having some of these pieces.
Second. Okay. So that's, then, excuse me, they would want to speak on the amendment.
Well, it's an interesting amendment, because as I understand, the main motion is authorizing the purchase, which we would still go ahead with. So the way I would interpret your amendment, Mike, would be that it asks the Arts Council at least to make an inquiry with the school district as to whether there's an opportunity there, and presumably then make a final decision. Are you proposing just to leave it with the Arts Council then after they've made their inquiry? Is that the idea, or what's the intent?
My intent is that they do that. I think I'm comfortable with that, Dan. Right.
Okay.
I would only say that we should keep in mind the fact that 4 of the 5 schools, the 3 elementaries and the middle school, are shortly to be rebuilt, probably on site in some fashion. So we might, even if you pursued that and had the Arts Council talk to the school district and have negotiate some location at one of those 4 schools, they would quickly, these pieces of art would quickly be disrupted by the construction going on. So I think that for that reason alone, it does not make sense pursuing that idea.
I'd say in concept, I think it's a good idea, but the broader concept is that this is supposed to be art for the community and all the community. And I think the numbers of people visiting the community center of all age groups would then have access to this. And I think that people who don't have kids in school feel somewhat uncomfortable a lot of times going to the schools. They don't have a purpose to be there. And I think that would be a limitation for the whole concept of public art. So I would think the concept, where you're going with this is good, but I think the broader concept is greater and it trumps that. So I would support the Arts Council and also support their process of figuring out where to place them.
Well, I'd support the amendment, and I would want to lead the final citing with the Arts Council, but I would make a strong recommendation that they look at all teaching opportunities on the island. And it doesn't just include the elementary schools. You know, we've got Peak, we've got other locations, and you might also consider an idea of placing them in strategic areas around the community so that it becomes almost a game to find all of the pieces on the island, as opposed to congregating them all at the community center, for instance. And to what extent we could tie it into our science curriculum, which, you know, I've been working with the school district to try to help. And I know that, you know, we've got city goals, we've got county goals, we've got national goals on science in particular for all ages. So to what extent we can further that, I think you're hearing my strong recommendation that you do so. So thank you.
Okay, we have the amendment. It's been seconded. Any more discussion on the amendment?
Yeah, I'm going to vote in favor of the amendment, not because I'm wedded to the idea of it being in the schools, but I think it's, I mean, I think the arguments made by Mike and Mike have some common sense to them, and it at least I would be willing to have the art commission make have one discussion with the school district, see if there's any interest in doing something. It doesn't mean all pieces have to go there. It could just mean one piece. It could mean even putting one piece inside to address L's point, where it's at least it's something that would be protected, and so you don't have to worry about being tagged. But it becomes an educational focus for one of the schools, and yeah, you're right, not every person in the community is going to see it, but even at the community center, not every person in the community is going to see it. And if we get a few hundred people or 1,000 people who look at it and spend more time than 5 seconds looking at it, then there's some value to it, and we've served a public purpose by making that possible. So it's worth a discussion, but then I'm perfectly happy to leave it to the Arts Council to make the final decision, but I like to at least see them have the discussion.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Nay. So I think that passed 4-3. Is that right? Okay. So then we're now back to the main motion as amended. Any other amendments? Discussion. Okay, seeing none, all those on the main motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. All right, so there you go. Thank you very much, and thanks for your determination on that. Well done. It's been, what, a year or so you've been working on this? Almost a year. Congratulations. So we'll go on then to the final agenda bill, 4687, financing future public improvements, town center, and upcoming comprehensive plan update. And we have Tim on the...
Great, thank you. Tim Stewart, Director of the Development Services Group. This is an item that Council requested the staff look at as part of your 2011 work plan, and that is to look at ways that we can finance future public improvements in the town center. I'd like to start off by doing a little bit of an analysis of where we are in the town center, and I think we all recognize that it is a model of high-quality, mixed-use, transit-friendly redevelopment. And it's partly the result, a legacy of good planning and also upfront capital facilities. Most of the infrastructure, perhaps not all, but most of the infrastructure in streets, pedestrian networks, utilities, parks are largely in place. And really what we're talking about is looking over the next 20 years, are there needs or desires that may come into play? And if so, what are the financial opportunities or tools that we might use to meet those funding needs given the serious financial constraints that we are currently facing? The opportunity to take this look could occur as part of the update of the comprehensive plan, which is currently scheduled for 2013 and 2014. The past upfront infrastructure financing has come from the general fund, real estate excise tax, utility fund, state and federal grants, and also the use of the State Environmental Policy Act, SEPA, which mitigates negative environmental impacts, and we've used that in a couple places. There are other financing tools that we haven't used that we might want to take a look at. One option is development impact fees. Another one would be local improvement districts. Transportation benefit districts are available, as well as an interesting thing called a parking and business improvement area. And I'll go into a little bit more detail later on. Starting off with SEPA, the State Environmental Policy Act provides that mitigation can be imposed upon a development when there are probable significant adverse environmental impacts. And there is a substantive authority associated with that, so permits can be denied or conditioned in order to avoid those environmental impacts. The test is that there must be a rational nexus and proportionality, and those are words you'll hear me use a couple times going through. Rational nexus means that there must be a connection to the impact, and proportionality simply means that the assessment must be proportional to solving the problem. You can't ask a developer to disproportionately do something, and you can't ask a developer to do something that is not related to that development. We've used SEPA substantive authority in the city primarily for transportation improvements, but there has also been use of SEPA for schools. Another tool that is authorized by state law is impact fees. And in order to do an impact fee, it must be approved by a local ordinance, and it's limited to improvements to public streets, parks, schools, or fire facilities. Again, we have the rational nexus and proportionality test, but an important constraint is that it can only be used to support new growth, so that when you get into the redevelopment, it becomes much more complex. It's a tool that's used and is very easy to use in greenfield development. Imagine 20, 30 years ago, before the plateau, Issaquah Highlands was built, was a raw mountaintop, nothing there. You're going to build so many new units, you're going to build so many roads, school, police, or fire facilities. And essentially an impact fee allows you to proportionally assess those costs against the benefited properties. So 100 properties, $1 million benefit, you can figure out what the nexus would be. It's much more complex when you move it into a redevelopment scenario, because not only is there benefit to the developing property, but there may also be public benefit or general benefit. And you cannot use an impact fee to subsidize the general benefit. So those are some of the limitations on impact fees. Another tool that's available, it's currently in our municipal code, is a local improvement district. And these are special assessments for local improvements. They can be done either by a petition from the property owners or by initiation from the city council. Again, we have the issue of direct and proportional benefit. And basically what this is a method where the cost of the improvements can be assessed directly to the benefited properties. So, example I used in the staff report was a 5-lot subdivision or 5-lot development. You need a sanitary sewer. 4 of the property owners come forward, ask for a special assessment district. If the city council were to approve it, the district would be built, sewer built, and then the benefit would be assessed against the 5 property owners, the 4, and that's where the last one comes in, where these things can be very contentious.
The last one we did that I can remember, most of you will remember this. It was the LID at Luther Burbank Park along 84th.
Gee, whose house was that?
Yes, that was Sven's LID.
Sven, of course, was referring to low-impact development, right?
Another tool that I think you're aware of, and I think Chip talked about this last time during the budgets, is the Transportation Benefit District, a relatively new animal that the state legislature authorized a few years ago. And as you know, the city council can take various actions without voter approval. This is a $20 vehicle license fee that you have the option of choosing to do. And then with voter approval, you have a number of other taxes, fees, charges, and tolls that may also be imposed. So it's a tool that's out there should you so choose. And the final one is a parking and business improvement area. And this is very much like an LID, except that the activities that can be used for the park and benefit improvement area is much broader. So under state law, you can create these and use them for parking facilities, acquisition, construction, and maintenance of parking facilities. You use them for decorations, events, music, programs, maintenance and security, and you have the authority to delegate the management and administration of these things to local nonprofits. The state legislature, the law actually references chambers of commerce. Talk a little bit about the comp plan update. We were originally scheduled to do this and complete it by this year. The state legislature gave us a reprieve, and we are now planning to do that as part of the 2013-2014 budget. City recaptured the money that had been appropriated in the 09 and 10 budget. There had been an appropriation of $160,000 for this effort. We're looking real hard at figuring out ways that we can reduce the cost of doing this update, but there are going to be some minimum requirements. We have to update the conditions and the demographics, the data. We have to incorporate the PED bike plan and the SMP, the policy elements of that. We should do a new capital facilities plan, and then we also have to do a new element, an economic development element, which was mandated by the state a number of years ago. Schedule for the plan update is that it's possible that we could discuss this in your planning session next year, and we're hoping that the scope of the work for the comp plan update will be determined in the 2013-2014 budget process, and we again are looking very hard at ways and means to try to minimize the cost of doing this update. So, conclusions, alternate financing tools may or may not be appropriate for Mercer Island. Given the financial constraints, new tools might be considered as we update the comprehensive plan, and the final work plan for the update will be determined in the next budget process.
I'm going to tag on real quickly. Tim and I were talking today about this topic, and we've, in some respects, come around full circle with regards to impact fees. When the city did the first comprehensive plan in the early 90s, we asked the same question. Should we look at impact fees? The legislature had allowed them. And at the time, we concluded that we are basically built out. We're infill development. And even though we had a downtown that needed complete makeover, and there was going to be a lot of change there, we still couldn't see how the law is written, how it would be applied on Mercer Island would really work well. And so we decided to go with SEPA mitigation as the tool to get resources instead of impact fees.
You should have called me back then.
Well, you would need to change that statute, because it is such a burden for so little money for places like us. Well, let me finish.
Okay.
We sort of re-asked all those questions, and we've concluded, for at least for the town center, for transportation and other town center impacts, SEPA is probably still our best tool. If you want to do impact fees, we don't think, the one place we think it might make some sense might be with respect to schools. With parks, Well, it depends if you think we need more parks in the downtown or more park development, because it's already redevelopment, and you can't use impact fees for redevelopment. So what I don't want to have happen is you get excited about this tool called impact fees because it's kind of known well and sexy, and they'll believe there's lots of money there. We don't think there's all that much money, and we do know there's a lot of administrative cost at managing that small amount of money. But schools may be a different topic, and we probably ought to have a conversation with the school district to see whether or not this is something they want to for us to take a look at.
All right. Can I counter with that?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on the SEPA issue because you've reached the threshold now. But the reason why I didn't agree with you on SEPA before is you always have a threshold issue that you have to cross in order to then start accruing money. And so, you
reach that threshold with just the development we've had.
That's right.
You're right.
Yes, and short of doing that, you had a lot of people that came in the door that got a free ride.
They used the excess capacity that we had.
Exactly.
Right.
Whereas if you had impact fees, everyone would have been treated equally, and you would have had the ability to garner some savings.
That is right, and we recognize that, and yet still the amount of money that would have been generated by those impact fees is still a fairly modest amount, and you have to track every dollar over and spend it within, 6 years, 8 years?
10 now.
And even the dollars we spend on transportation now aren't all that much. It would have been a lot of work for not a lot of money. SEPA seems to be an easier tool, at least now. So I hear you, and you're right.
Question, has Mercer Island ever used the TBD or PBIA ever?
Not that I know of.
We proposed, it's a proposal light, wasn't a real strong proposal, but we included it in the biennial budget last biennium. We teed up a transportation benefit district. Councilmember Grady argued for it passionately, and the council wasn't prepared to go there at least 2 years ago. And we're ready to put it back up in front of you. What I think is most important, economic.
Sorry, we'll move along.
What's most important there, I think, is to be very clear how you want to spend the money. Those transportation benefit districts have a wide range of things you can use the money on, and I'm not sure your constituents would quite go there with you if you can't be really clear how you're going to take that $20 per vehicle and apply it to this problem. So it would be up to the council to get really specific on that. How are we on your presentation?
I'm done.
You're done. Okay, I want to make sure. All right. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for this, and the preamble to it was the council asked for this, and yet I guess I'm not recollecting clearly exactly what it was that precipitated our request, and I feel a little bit like I've heard the answer but not the question. So can you help with what were we looking for?
Bruce, that's Karnak. Karnak the Magnificent.
They're supposed to.
What don't you understand about that?
Yeah, I think the history of it was that staff was looking very, very diligently at ways and means to find additional revenues as we went into this year. And one of the things that came up during discussion at your planning session was the possibility of looking at impact fees.
Yeah, Tim actually came to me and then came to the whole council when we were talking about revenue and said, I'm not sure that we have really used impact fees like maybe we could. So and I said, all right, if you want to make a run at it, let's take another shot and study it. And we promised you we would get back to you on that question and then how we might think about any sort of improvements in the town center as we go through whatever next phases of redevelopment, which, by the way, I think you'll probably see in the next 7 to 10 years 4, maybe 5 significant projects. So, we're probably 60% done down there in terms of redevelopment. I could see more happening.
So, at the risk of putting you on the spot, can you name something that you think might be the most plausible candidate for one of these fees to...
For impact fees, or?
You pick your poison, but where do you see sort of the most likely need for us to go and dollars not available?
Well, as I look out sort of into the near and more distant future, and as the town center continues to grow and mature, I can see parking evolving as an issue, not only in terms of meeting the needs, but also in potentially shared parking and then common management of parking in the town center. I think that one of the best mechanisms for developing a place, making a great place, is the programming of that place and the activities that go into it, and the promotion of the place. So as I look out, the potential for a parking and business improvement area out over the next 10 or 15 years might be something that we ought to be talking to the property owners in the town center about, and the chamber and other interested groups, to see if they are willing to do more in terms of promotion and development of and management and operation of the town center. So that's an opportunity. I think Rich mentioned the school impact fee. I think that we ought to take a careful, closer look at that one.
Parking and schools are the two places I would go. On parking, you could do a transportation benefit district and use those dollars to finance the debt on Mercer Island parking spaces. We are midway through a process that I'm hopeful will produce additional commuter parking spaces paid for by Sound Transit. That's still very much alive, but they won't be Mercer Island only. If you continue to want to go in that direction and finance some of that parking yourself, this is a tool to do that. The parking and business improvement area is in a way, it's not unlike the tool that is used in most states in this country called tax increment financing. It's not constitutional in this state, at least not yet, where you basically you raise funds, you're taxing the added value that accrues to property owners from redevelopment. You tax it now, produce the improvement adds value, and you build it. I don't have the sequence quite right there, but it's the tool that's used just about everywhere, we just don't have it in Washington. Okay. This gets to about as close as it comes in the state of Washington, where you're taxing the property owners in a business area to add value to their properties by building things and doing activities.
And it would require the owners, the property owners, to really be the driver here and say, this is something we would like to do to create these additional services or facilities, and we're willing to pay an assessment to do that and spread it equally amongst all the benefited properties.
You probably want to get the major property owners to a little higher level of tenancy. Well, I mean, right now they just don't in tenancy. I mean, they got empty spaces. They're probably not going to be real eager right now, but could be in a couple of years.
Great.
Okay. Any more questions? No?
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Let's move on then. We're finished with regular business. Council member absences. Any? We're not going to be having. This will be
yes.
For the
I'll
year.
Be absent for a while.
2 years.
Okay. Planning schedule. So I guess our next meeting will be the first meeting of the year. We'll be deciding the mayor and deputy mayor.
That's correct. And right now we're not showing any business other than that.
When are we coming? When is parking on the Mercers coming back? It's not on here.
It's not you're right. We told you last meeting, it's not coming back until we have an implementation plan.
Right, so when, but
It'll be in the spring.
no, it should be other items to be scheduled. One of the things that, and I think Mike made the comment last time, we need to get more discipline on the other items to be scheduled.
Actually, we did do that. We got all the list of all the other items to be scheduled that have accrued or built over the last 6 months, and either they have gone away because either the work got done or the staff no longer needed the council to hear it, or it's on the list.
Well, that's why I say the parking on the Mercers should therefore be on this list, because it's clearly something the council has directed staff to come back on, and so it's obviously something to be scheduled because it's not scheduled yet.
All right. Well, spring.
No, but I'm just saying, but that kind of, anything like that, we need to just have the discipline to make sure it stays on the schedule. The other thing I will throw out, and because I'm concerned about it, is I think that we're going to have tolling on 520 in the next couple of weeks, I guess. I am very, very concerned as to what the impact on that's going to be on I-90. And I think that this may need to be something that comes back before the council very quickly, and would ask staff to be monitoring this very seriously as soon as tolling's implemented, so we understand, have a real good feel for what the impact is on commuter traffic off of the island.
We'd be happy to do that. If you remember, Craig Stone, the director of the tolling office, told you the first 2 or 3 months won't tell you the story. It's going to be chaos. And you're going to have to get into it several months before you'll know truly what the impact is.
But I think that if it is chaos, then it's going to be incumbent upon the city to be continuously advising islanders as to what's going on, what the trends are, what seems to be happening out there. Because if it turns into a parking lot out there, then we're not going to have the luxury of just sitting around for 2 or 3 months trying to work our way through this. So it's something we need to be monitoring as a city council and as a city staff.
I agree. Yeah. We'll monitor it, and we'll try and do whatever we can to communicate to our citizens about what's going on.
There's a new app out there. Just send them the new app. What's that app called?
Chaos.
Okay. Any more comments on the planning schedule?
The planning session date, have you heard back from enough council members to have that?
I've heard back from everybody, and there was none of the 4 dates that had all 7 of you.
Typical.
And there was one that had 6 out of 7, and the other 3 had 5 out of 7. The one that had 6 out of 7 was January 27th to the 29th. Actually, no, Debbie was the 7th. So.
Debbie sent you was just that she said February 3rd was the only one she could make.
She's one of the ones that could make it.
Oh, okay.
There's only one that couldn't make it on the 27th.
That's usually Mike, because he doesn't like the planning session.
No, you could.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll leave it to you guys.
Well, can
so you're working.
Can we pin it down to the 27, 28 then? Because
can you rearrange your schedule, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to cost
you.
Okay.
Buy your beer.
Okay, we have one board appointment, and I had the liaison. This was Councilmember Ciro. Would you like to make the motion?
Let's see here. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Madison Nimmo for the Youth and Family Services Advisory Board, 9th grade position.
Hey, we have a second? Second. Okay, any discussion?
Thank you.
Do you want to speak to the motion?
You want to speak to the motion, Mike?
The only comment I'd make is it's great to see young people stepping up into positions on councils.
Yeah, it was.
Is he under 18? No.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, great. Madison, you're in. So, council member report, starting from council member Ciro's side.
No, I don't have anything.
I do. Youth and Family Services, I think the time has since expired, but it's a family, I can't remember the title of it. Help me out. Where you buy a gift card for a family on the island.
Giving Tree.
Was it the Giving Tree? Yeah, great program. And I know Cindy had to leave early, but boy, to what extent we can keep going with stuff like that is great. And I know I went down to Youth and Family Services, and it was just, people coming in left and right supporting the program. So it's really, really great to see. And I have to say that, the scary thing is these are all people that live on the island. So, we've got a lot of people out there that need help, and it's really great. I didn't. I know, I didn't go there. I'm being nice. I'm saying, one, there are a lot of people on the island that need help, and two, there are a lot of people that are, coming forward to help them out. So that was really impressive. Thank you, Cindy, wherever you are.
Bruce?
And I misspoke, Madison is a girl.
Yes.
So, well done, Madison.
Good catch. Okay. Jane?
I just, all I have to say is, good night, Al. and
Is that the sign off?
that's the sign, and that's the way it is.
Al, any last good nights?
The previous wasn't enough?
Okay.
Good night, one last time.
Okay, with that, the final council meeting of the year, and also I just want to wish you and your families and staff and their families a very safe and happy holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. And thank you for a wonderful year.
And I will wish everybody a Merry Christmas.
Amen.
There you go. Happy Hanukkah.